Hello and good morning. How are you doing?
Arrows, I'm well. How are you?
Oh, absolutely, sir. You're up there in Bozeman, Montana. I grew up in Billings.
Oh, you did? Oh, great, great. Where are you right now?
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay, great.
Have you ever gone over there to the Bozeman Tunnel and walked around that area? I mean, because you're a man that likes to get into the wild areas of the world, and my grandfather helped create that tunnel, and I've always wondered, has anybody ever walked through that tunnel?
No. Where is it? I don't know about it.
It's in between Livingston and Bozeman, and it's right there. And, in the old days, when it was only a two-lane highway, you could see that tunnel perfectly. But nowadays, with that four-lane road, you've got to know that it's there.
Oh, no, I didn't know about it, and I've lived here a long time.
The things that you do, where do you find the confidence to go into areas that are off the path? Because I always fear of getting lost. How do you find yourself in those places of being lost?
He had the GPS. He had the maps. He had a point man with a machete who was cutting a hole through the forest for us. He would speak to that point man in Lingala, the local language, and say, "Tukendeboy, Tukendeboy, Tukendeboy." And that meant this way. He would point this way, that way. That's what his compass told him. And we would crouch down and hike through that hole that had been cut through the forest. Speaking of tunneling, it was like tunneling through wherever he went.
Do you find yourself being this modern-day Ansel Adams?
No, because I don't take the photographs. I am strictly a writer for National Geographic, and I have had the world photographers, National Geographic photographers, Nick Nichols, who I worked with on my very first assignment, this epic hike across the Congo with Mike Fay, and a number of others. So I'm not the Ansel Adams. I'm, if anything, maybe the James Agee that's working with Ansel Adams, the guy that supplies the words.
How about the wildness of this nation? I live in a forest here in Charlotte that we created with 1,700 trees, and it's like I love the edge of being right there in that that moment of you never know what's expected. It's got to be fascinating to your imagination to be able to capture it and then share it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're walking through the Congo forest and suddenly you come across a forest elephant with a calf, and she gets agitated and she's deciding whether she's going to charge you or not. What are you going to do there? Do you run from a forest elephant or do you stand your ground? You go on a little farther. The next day, there's a gaboon viper curled up right in the spot that you were going to put your foot. You give that a respectful distance and keep hiking. A little farther, there's a column of army ants. I want to tell you one thing, Arrow. One thing you do not want to do when you're walking through the Congo forest in a pair of river sandals and shorts is step on a column of army ants. I learned that the hard way. So you stay alert, and you enjoy these crazy wild creatures and try not to impinge on them or let them impinge on you, and keep going. And scribble it all. If you're me, you scribble it all in your notebook and tuck your notebook into your Ziploc bag when you swim across the rivers, and keep going, get the story, and bring it home.
When you speak of these army ants, are we talking about the same ones that the locals will use as a spiritual journey by putting their hands into the holes and it really it's part of becoming a man?
Well, I'm sure I haven't heard about that particular practice, but in one of the cultures, one of the indigenous cultures of Central Africa, I can well imagine that would be a trial. Because I'll tell you what, these ants, some of them, I can't remember the species name, but there's a particular kind of ant that is so painful when it stings you or bites you. Some of them sting, some of them bite, and some of them bite to hang on and sting you repeatedly. And this ant is so formidable that it would occupy a particular tree, and you would find this tree in a little clearing, and the ants would be living on the tree, and if you touched that tree, they would swarm onto you. And I was told that it was even I don't know if it was a spiritual journey or a form of torture that was used in some cultures. I think that there were at least stories that they would tie a person to that tree if they had captured an enemy and they wanted to torture him. So we were very careful when we came to those particular kinds of tree. David, do not touch the limb. Do not step any closer than you're standing right now. give this tree a wide berth and lots of respect, because you do not want to experience the ants that are living on that tree.
Oh, my God. The name of the book is The Heartbeat of the Wild. And studying this book, it's almost like you are the closest to the heartbeat. And you're taking us there, but it's almost like returning to the womb, that you're listening to the origin of that heartbeat of the wild.
Well, and the wild is hard to define. The heartbeat is hard to define. But when I pulled these pieces together and to make them a coherent book with updated reporting and connective tissue describing how the stories came about and how one story led to another during my 20 years with National Geographic, I wanted to think, what's the essence of the wild? What do we mean when we talk about preserving the wild or the last wild places? And so in the foreword, I try and define it. I say that wildness is a name that we give to living nature on this particular planet at its most robust, its most complex, its most diverse, its most undiminished. And what does that mean? Well, it means more than wild creatures. It means more than wild places. It means also the processes that interconnect creatures in wild places. Processes like predation and herbivory and photosynthesis and parasitism and decomposition. All of that is wrapped up into this concept of wildness. And you can't have it in a zoo. I mean, zoos perform important services, but when you've got a tiger in a cage in a zoo, is that wildness? Well, no, it's a dangerous animal. But to have real wildness, you need that tiger to be still in its ecosystem with the cheetal deer that it eats and the creatures that it competes with, the Asian elephants that might occasionally give it a run for its money, all of the other plant, animal, fungi, bacterial forms of life in that ecosystem. That's what I mean by wild.
Is it because we're from Montana that you and I love these journeys in nature? Because the seed becomes the tree, becomes the giver to the forest floor. It also gives to the writer so that we have something to document our paths on. I mean, there's such a continuation in everything, and I'm fascinated by that.
I think that Montana has something to do with it. I mean, you were born in Montana. I moved here in 1973. Right after I finished graduate school. I had always been interested in the natural world and always interested in writing. And I had some great teachers who developed my interest, helped me become a writer. And I left the natural world behind. And then in 73, I wanted to get back to wild places. So I came to Montana and I sort of rediscovered that interest. And I had started my writing career as a novelist, but I eventually abandoned fiction writing and turned to nonfiction so that I could write about biological sciences, ecology, evolutionary biology, the scientists who practice those sciences, the field biologists like Jane Goodall and Edward O. Wilson and a lot of unknown but brilliant people who work in these wild places. So I turned to that. But it was coming to Montana, and a place where when you walk in the forest, you're aware that grizzly bears and moose and other amazing creatures are out there. It gives you a certain respect and humility. It was being here in Montana that reawakened my interest in the wild and led to this long career of writing about such places, not just in Montana, Yellowstone, places like that, but around the world.
Wow. David, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you very much, Arrow. I'd love to do that.
Please.
We'll talk about it.
You be brilliant today, okay, sir?
You too, Arrow. Have a great day.